now I think it is time for the workshop. Guys, you ready?
Yeah, we are ready.
All right, so the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening. Is it evening? Yeah, it is evening. I just came from California yesterday, so I'm super jet-lagged. But we will make this a fun and entertaining experience. I have to get the clicker. I assume this is the clicker. This looks like this. Yeah. So we have a presentation, but it's not so important. Yeah, so thanks for joining. You guys are really the tough ones because a workshop at 6 o'clock, that's remarkable. So thank you for being here. This workshop is on collaboration and coordination, how to create energy tech ecosystems. And just outside, like 15 minutes ago, we changed the agenda a little bit. Martin, you don't know this. So actually, we will talk about what we have planned to talk about, but we added a topic. And the topic is how startups and scale-up can work together with strategics, so customers. And we were discussing whether you really partner with your customer or you just simply sell your product. An exchange of value, you get the money, the customer gets the product or the service. But I think, Henri, we concluded that in startup and innovation land, it's more than this usual customer-supplier relationship or customer-vendor relationship, because we are typically doing innovative things. So kind of there's always an innovation, experimental character. We try to tap into new territories. So I think we will add this topic as well, because it's a very rich topic to talk about. So we start with a short introduction of the colleagues here and also what the companies are doing. So Martin, you want to start?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the spontaneous changing of the agenda. I'm very curious about this discussion now. My name is Martin. I'm managing director of Digikoo. Digikoo is a platform company, and our platform is called DigiPad. I like the addition to the agenda because Digikoo stands for Digital Cooperation, or in German, Digitale Kooperation. This is where the K comes from. And the DigiPad, which we are using or providing to our customers, this again provides strategic insight on the heat, the energy, and the mobility transition to those using it. These insights we are visualizing on a map in the DigiPad, which pretty much looks like Google Maps, but not focused on restaurants and clubs, but on the heat, mobility, and energy transition. What does it mean now? How can that look? So if, for example, the energy company of the city of Warsaw is interested in, well, how will solar potential develop in Warsaw over the next 2-3 decades? Then they would log into the DigiPad. They will select a region which they're interested in, for example, Warsaw. They will select a topic of heat, energy, or mobility which they're interested in, for example, solar, rooftop PV, and they would select an analysis they are interested in, so development over the next 3 decades. And then they would purchase that on the platform, and they see then on these Google Maps-like visualization where in Warsaw will be how many rooftop PV installations in 2030, 40, 50, and they can do that with any topic they like to. With heat pumps, for example, where will be heat pumps? With EV charging infrastructure, where will be this in Warsaw? And by this, our partners and customers, they are able to align their strategic decision-making to these developments. What can that mean? That can mean they can plan on a very long view. How should energy infrastructure, how should data infrastructure, how should electricity, gas infrastructure be developed over the next 3 decades? But it can also mean that they probably decide, because they see these developments, that they want to acquire a service provider for rooftop PV projects and so on and so forth. So we are an intelligence provider for corporate development, for business development, for strategists, for asset management, focused on distribution system operators, so energy grids basically, and on municipal energy companies. That's what we do. Our customers are mainly in Germany, that's our focus, municipal energy companies, municipal distribution system operators. Who knows, the German market knows that's around 900 customers we are focusing on. We are a corporate startup. We're a spin-off of Westnetz. Westnetz is the largest German distribution system operator. We are E.ON subsidiary, so very happy to be here. And also hear the offer about planting trees in your name, so please use it. We are happy to support that. We are around 20 employees at the moment, and we are partnering a lot, which is why I'm very happy about being here and discussing this topic with you, because I really think partnering enables you to focus on the things you're good in and maybe outsource some things to partners where you're only mediocre in.
Awesome. So I recommend to have a look at the platform. Whenever we demo this and show this to people, they open your mouth like the utility people there. We haven't seen anything like this before. This is too good to be true. The good news is it's true. Henri, what are you guys doing?
So Henri, I'm just doing hello from Europe. I'm a power engineer by education. We're working in the intersector of industry for around 10 years. Pretty much the entire career has revolved around power line inspection and maintenance, power grids, making it more resilient. Using drones, using satellites, using helicopters, on-ground inspection, different static sensors, simulations behind the workplace, whatever needs to be done in order to, I said, make the grid more resilient. So find defects, digitize and analyze power grids. I am also a serial entrepreneur. One of the companies where I'm passive owner at the moment is a company that is engaging in power line and infrastructure design projects, and also developing and installing wind and solar. And the company that I'm actively engaging at the moment as a CEO and founder is Hepta Airborne. And Hepta Airborne is automating power line analysis. Well, actually, the automation itself, it's not an end goal, it's an enabler. It helps to optimize the grid maintenance, helps to get dangerous, or let's say, on-ground inspection teams out of hazardous working environment, accelerates the speed of inspections, improves the quality, improves the disconnection rates in the utilities, grids and networks, and so forth. So, and just about the product itself, it's AI-driven software, or let's say the process itself, how we analyze the data that is coming in from different sensors, that's AI-driven, so we deploy our own machine learning models to detect grids, data, and defects from the grid with a higher quality. In general, we sell new optimization plans for the utilities, which means that we roll up our sleeves, and instead of just selling a standalone software, we also help them in data acquisition side. So how they can enroll into a new optimization plan, how they can have access to the data first, and once you have that data or those terabytes of data, then this is where we have the long-term relationship with the utility, helping them to analyze the power line data. So,
thank you. Yeah, I will use my introduction to segue to the topic. So I work for Intertrust. Intertrust is a data interoperability company for energy data. So we provide an abstraction layer that makes data accessible and usable in a way that the data can reside anywhere. It doesn't matter which cloud system is used or a proprietary data center. And we make it accessible without transferring it. So it becomes very easy to extract the information that we want to have to manage the energy system without moving or copying the data. Sounds also, if you are like in the data operations space, too good to be true, but I mean, that's a a core innovation and will be required for decentralization in the energy system, for 100% renewables. If you think about what you really need to get there, then you need to have like orchestration, you need to have data flow throughout the different parts of the value chain across company and organizational borders. And the only way to deliver that is by using abstraction layers and making the information available without putting all the data in one place. So this is something that we are doing. I spent 15 years in the European utility industry and actually the last 7 years in Silicon Valley. And since 2.5 years, I'm working for Intertrust. And the idea for this workshop and to talk about it and share a bit of the thinking and the experience is related with what we do on the tech side. So we are like an enabler. We are enabling AI applications, solution, apps that help to improve energy systems with organizing the data that is required to do so in a very unique and very new way. And part of my work over the last 2.5 years at Intertrust was to find application partners that make what we do on the data operations side more clear and more understandable to customers in the energy industry, like utilities, for example, or renewable energy operators, and so on and so forth. And so that's a little bit the context. And we want to structure this workshop or discussion around 3 different elements. So, why do you think about partnering? I mean, why is this relevant? What are the different options, the different models that are around, and how actually do you do this? So when you are like a small company, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people, I mean, what actions can you take that don't make you losing focus or, don't make you burning hours without any return? So that's something to keep in the back of the mind. So I would like to start asking the colleagues here what their view is, why they consider partnering, why they are partnering. So what drives and motivates you to do this stuff? So Martin, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So from my point of view, I've already given just a few sentences about that. So I believe that as a young company or as a small company also, no matter if you call yourself a startup or not, you need to focus on what you're excellent at. And I think it's absurd to assume that you are excellent at all the things that are necessary to be successful in business. I think it's simply not possible. In German, you call that the eierlegende Wollmilchsau. For those not proficient in German, it's a term you can Google. It's a very nice word. And this means that you have something that can do everything, that can be light and heavy at the same time, that can be fluid and steady at the same time. And that's not possible. So for me, partnering, especially in the energy space, is an essential element to be successful, because the complexities, for example, we are dealing with on the platform, on the DigiPad, the heat transition, mobility transition, and energy transition. This alone, to understand it entirely, you can hire a consultancy for a month for millions of euros to explain that to you, to build the whole logical tree to make it transparent. And this is only the content. You haven't started to build up a sales team who's able to explain that to customers, to be trusted advisor. You haven't built up a development team who can translate this actually into AI, and so forth and so on, so on and so forth. So I believe the sheer complexity of the industry we're working at makes it extremely useful to find partners who can take over business-related tasks that are not core to your value creation. And this along the whole value chain. I think we can talk about that a little more later. But please, first your view on that.
Yeah, I probably take even a few steps back and into a more generic level. I think the the roots of that question, why to partner and the roots of the answer are basically or revolve around what the customer eventually wants, what the end customer wants. And we've been sailing in uncharted waters for the past few years, especially as we've seen. We've been in the midst of the pandemic. The economy, there's a lot of moving parts in the economy. I mean, we have geopolitical situation in Central and Eastern Europe, if you can put it that way, and so forth. And to me, at least, I've noticed a pattern that more and more the customer starts inclining towards end-to-end from one reliable source. And that means basically, that means integrations, that means custom tailored solutions. And now if you bring it down to you're trying to deploy something new, something innovative, and even more, you're a startup, you're small, there's scarcity in your resources and so forth, then it's impossible, exactly as you said, it's impossible to have all the bits and pieces together in order to deliver the entire value chain, what the customer wants, the end-to-end solution. So there's no other way. You need to partner up.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, the way I think we try to address that here is to think a little bit and reflect a little bit what are the challenges that we as a corporate startup face. You have additional challenges that you face being embedded in a corporate.
What do you mean?
I wonder whether it's more difficult to fundraise from VCs or from a corporate. Maybe corporate is even more challenging. Yeah? A lot of people don't have that on the radar because they think, the corporate is just, pouring money in. But I think it's very hard. You go to boards, you have to convince them, a very critical audience. You do things they don't understand. So I think there are some extra challenges.
A lot of layers. You have to influence so many.
Yeah. So, and I think there's also a way how to address that. So I mean, from a content perspective, you talked about the energy value chain. It's very complex. We have to. I think one other aspect that's not listed here is the security and also the governance requirements that you have in energy. It's critical infrastructure. So it's great to have like self-steering IoT devices at home that consume energy and switch on and off whenever the wholesale market makes it attractive to do so. But of course, there's a threat that some people, some hackers attack these devices and they pretend an event, and all of a sudden everything switches on, and then you have a blackout. I think there was a study being made in Australia. If you would switch on all pool pumps in Australia at once, blackout of 1 week, because the complete energy system would collapse. So these are things that are new, and so that means you have to build in additional security features into your offering, and that's something that typically you have to rely on someone to deliver that. I think another aspect also that I think it's important is your visibility. I mean, there are like startup conferences and events where we provide visibility to ourselves. I mean, luckily more and more people take notice, but if you're a small company, you can't run very significant PR campaigns. And what I recognized over the last 2 years is that when you, for example, use social media for creating more visibility, when you announce partnerships, there is a quite significant response, so people react to that. And you really see that on likes you get on LinkedIn or stuff like that. So I think it's a topic which is loaded with positive energy. So people like the word partnership. It's like it has a positive connotation.
I think it gives a sense of like in regards to the public perception, the credibility, something what every startup should do. As in the energy tech, we're working with big corporates, and in order for us to become more credible, that's what it gives. Definitely, I agree.
Also, I think an additional aspect is, I mean, when you are like in this treadmill, trying to grow and nurture your company, it becomes difficult to see what's going on left or right, and to have like people that you can informally also soundboard with, So we, for example, we talk about all sorts of business-related things that go beyond what's your technology, what's my technology, what's the synergy between the technology. Actually, we haven't talked about technology at all because, I mean, that comes when it becomes relevant. But so you get like, you know, sparings partners. You discuss generic issues like, oh, how do we crack more accounts? We put networks, our personal networks, over each other and see where we have synergies. You know someone here, I know someone there, and so this is like really value, I think, and additional benefits that we get out of this. Yeah? I have a question, especially for you, Henri, because you're fundraising right now. So if you're an investor, please talk to Henri. Do you see any relevance of this topic for fundraising efforts? Is it a good story to tell? Are VCs interested to hear anything about it, or how do you see that?
I mean, in general, of course, visibility, exactly as you said. We have to be out there. We have to show that you know, we are at least credible enough to also work with different companies out there. The bigger, the better. And I think it also gives this kind of like a strategic fit that through, I don't know, working with Intertrust and so forth, then we have our way into the customer eventually as well. And we are in the midst of this, you know, market penetration and then working with different companies. I think in general, there's this kind of like an indirect impact that it creates. Maybe difficult to try to think whether how this materializes in a very tangible way. But indirect value definitely is there.
Yeah.
And maybe I can add from the other side. So at the moment I have 2 jobs. I'm doing the managing director role of Digikoo, and I'm also leading the corporate development of Westenergie, which is E.ON's largest subsidiary in Germany. And before, I'm coming from the energy world of the E.ON part of the E.ON thing, and we've done a lot in partnering with startups. And for us, then, from a corporate point of view, it's extremely important to see what other corporate needs does a company has a company seen? How is a company navigating through an ecosystem of different struggles? How are they able to connect to different parts of the market? Because in the world, in the energy industry, these kind of big companies like E.ON or like RWE, they are an ecosystem in itself, and it's very complex. And it does. You just made this heuristic comment. It has its own rules, and partnering shows to me in the second role, okay, a young company is actually able to adapt to these rules, to go along with somebody. It's able to build up a relationship, and this is extremely important. It's even more than financial traction, I believe, because that will come anyway if these relationshiping basically has been proven. So from corporate point of view, I think that's it's extremely important to show these abilities.
I mean, that's a good point, and also I think it triggers like the modified agenda point that we want to talk about here as well. You know, how does partnering look like between a potential corporate customer and a startup or a scale-up? How? And you are living in both worlds, so I would like to know from you, how do we avoid that the partnership is not very impactful for the startup on a corporate development and revenue side, and it's more like, you know, entertaining the innovation theater needs of the corporate, where, like, you know, corporate executives typically are kind of middle-aged, yeah, surround themselves with young, dynamic, or sometimes not so young startup people and feel good, it becomes like a bit of a well-being thing. And I speak from deep own experience, so I've seen quite a bit of this pattern, which is okay if it's a bit, but if it becomes like the dominant activity, then, well, corporates lose out on innovation and startups lose out on existing. So how do we how do we manage that on the corporate side, this relationship, and what can you do on the startup side that you avoid these innovation theater pitfalls, I would call them?
Yeah. It is not an easy answer, I think, but I believe one of the major behaviors that can avoid this situation is, on the startup side at least, total honesty on their goals. So in the corporate world, we know that we sometimes do projects because of the project or because of something in the background. So it's normal to do something which probably in the first place does not have a huge impact. That's, I mean, everybody who's worked in a great organization, doesn't have to be a corporate, can be a sports club or some governing body from a school, knows sometimes this discussion like make themselves survive. And it's very important to make these differences in targets clear from the very beginning. So for a corporate, taking an hour or two to talk to a startup or invite them to a pitch, it's as you say, that you do that once in a while. There's a board offsite, you need some inspiring speakers, you invite companies who see big money in a corporate, and afterwards you ghost them. Right? So like in the worst scenario. And I think there's responsibility on both sides. There's a responsibility on the corporate side to say, what do we want? What do we need from you? Why do we invite you? But there's also a responsibility on the startup side to say, why do we come? What do we need? When are we satisfied with this interaction, with this relationship in the end, and when are we not satisfied? It's the same as for any human interaction, I think. You need to be honest and transparent and to make sure what your expectations are, and I think this would help a lot. I do not think that you can prevent it to 100%, because in the end, people are, and this is a good thing, I think if I'm in my second role and I'm inspired by your company and your idea, and I invite you, and then over the course of 2 months, and it takes always 2 weeks to make a meeting with me because I have so many other corporate things to do, and then over the course of the 2 months I figure out, hey, that's actually not what we need. I think that's a fair thing that can happen, but I think it's very important to make sure that it's not discussions for the sake of it or for just networking or something. And there's responsibility on both sides to make that very clear, and I think this would help a lot.
Mm. Yeah, and not adding much, but maybe just reiterating what you said from the startup angle. I think that always the business opportunity has to be there, a tangible effort from the business side, and the way we do it, at least, is maybe it doesn't sound as sexy, but we try to avoid the innovation teams in a sense that, from our perspective, we're analyzing the greed, which means that we usually approach asset management. And often we are directed to the innovation teams, but which is in some cases it's good as well, but we always try to keep the asset management as close as possible. So they are the eventual decision makers. They will conduct the due diligence on the technical side of our value offering. So, and once we have that initial interest, or even further, we have a pilot project or we have a follow-on deal, then it makes sense to see how the innovation team actually can proliferate this in the full extent of the organization, whether it's CVC fund, whether it's direct funding, or it's just actually securing the relationship to the larger extent of the customer's electricity network or whatever the value proposition is eventually. But I think it all comes down to you have to focus on the business itself, not so much on innovation. And unfortunately, we've also had a few of those experiments in the past where when we're working with innovation teams, but it's been pretty much about just they have their budgets, let's deliver a PR fancy pilot project, but eventually nothing will happen after that. But the reason why we're doing pilot projects is to get an actual business, right? So we're also trying to, unfortunately, we see less often that kind of a pattern these days, but we're trying to avoid it by also let's say, qualifying our leads. And this is just based on like simple research and questions like what happens, what are the KPIs we need to meet in order to deliver this first pilot project or demo. If we do that, what will happen next? Just like tasting the momentum and the readiness of that customer and also the innovation team. If it's just about piloting, then this is not our business. So yeah, it all comes down to just making business tangible.
That's, I think, an interesting statement. So what you're saying is that you're trying to avoid the innovation teams. You're saying you're trying to avoid the people that are paid by the corporate to bring the innovation and do exactly what needs to be done. So to corporate innovators in the world, think about that. I mean, I was 5 years a corporate innovator myself, and not only was I trying to deliver more than Innovation Theater, I was also based in Silicon Valley, which is good for me. But when the headquarter of your company is in Europe, I mean, this is like the most distant place. I mean, Hawaii is even more distant, but it's 9 hours time difference, 11 hours flight, so really, really a challenge. I mean, I would dig a little bit deeper because that really, you know, I don't feel offended, but it's like.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's also a bit too radical statement trying to avoid the innovation teams, but I mean, the main message here, the emphasis is on the point that we have to keep the main business close as well. You can't just talk with innovation. At least from our experience, this hasn't materialized. Let's say 9 out of 10 times, this hasn't materialized in actual business relationship. This has materialized as only talking about innovation. But sometimes, of course, it's also getting, you know, through innovation. It's the closest way to get, or the fastest track to get to the main business as well. But once you're in there, you're working with both innovation, but also with the main business. So that's maybe the more.
Yeah, I think probably it's like you need to have a good combination. And
yes.
What comes to my mind listening to you is a couple of years ago, I started together with some comrades the Free Electrons program, big accelerator program, 10 utilities. And in the first year, you know, we had like 3 modules each year where the utilities would interact with the startups. And in the beginning, only innovation people showed up from all these utilities and everything was great. Yeah. The problem, nothing happened. And the goal of this Free Electrons program is and was always that there is a money transfer from the utility pocket to the startup pocket. Primarily buying product, investment, nice, but that was not really the core objective. Yeah? And what happened over time, and we have now 5 years of data, that more and more business unit people got involved because you could fly to fancy places and so on. So there was a fun element. It was like very attractive, I think, to go there, like Singapore, Australia, Dubai, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, less attractive maybe. But, and I think the combination, that's, I think, what makes the difference. I think where the innovation people can really help, the CVC people, but also the more general innovation people is, you know, organizing things internally to get in front of the right people. And based on my experience now over the last 2.5 years, that works nicely. And I see also energy companies where the corporate VC people are really sophisticated in bringing the right people to the table. So what I see mostly is then a combination of business also and IT. So because, you know, we are doing IT stuff, and that's very fruitful because the business person has the use case, and the IT people, they own or they have a say in, you know, which software do we test and buy and stuff like that. So yeah. Okay, so switching gears, why partner? I think we've touched that. So what are the options? How do we do that? I mean, this is like a little bit, this is generic, but we think there are like 4 categories. So you can have a consulting partner, consulting companies. What I learned, especially if you do new things, that can be useful because, I mean, McKinsey, of course, advises all top managements from all companies in the world, actually, and also the energy-related ones. And if they know what you're doing, then that can be helpful because they do a lot of foresight advisory, and so they can be helpful in providing a ground for projects. System integration partners, especially in the software side, when you have to bring your technology into an existing environment. If you have a standalone solution, that's maybe less relevant, yeah, but especially on the energy data tech side, where you have to connect to some of the operational data sources and so on. You can have these partners, solution partners. I mean, that's something I'm very active with. I explained we have back office technology, data operations technology that nurtures applications that need data and AI to accelerate the energy transition. So we can have solution partners and of course sales partners, and the first three can also be like sales partners where you agree on revenue share deals. I would like to start with Martin with the question, how do you see these options? What is relevant for you? What is less relevant for you? You talked about you have to focus on core things, and then there are like non-core things that you're open to partners. So what is for you core? What is more non-core? What is relevant? What is less relevant?
Yeah, at Digikoo, for us, it's core to provide the intelligence of the developments for the complexities in energy, heat, and mobility transition to our partners. So that's basically, in a way, that's really only a tiny part, because it's only the consolidation and aggregation of all knowledge and developments which are out there, have that packaged, and help our partners and customers with that, making better decisions. Anything else around this is for us possible to do with partners. So we're partnering with Intertrust, for example, for the whole IT infrastructure. They're our platform provider, where we build on top the DigiPad and benefit very much from very sophisticated data rights management. But we also partner with consultancy firms, for example, in a sales environment, because what we basically provide is the automation and digitization of consultancy in the energy space. And many municipal energy companies do not have the resources to pay for a 2-month McKinsey project. That's automated suddenly by us. But we also partner in product development with the research institutions, because I described in the very beginning how these interdependencies between heat mobility and energy transition needs to be modeled. And that's something like scientific modeling is not exactly something you do every day if you come from a distribution system operator. So by doing these kinds of partnering approaches, we are able to actually focus on the question, how can we make infrastructure decisions for our customers better than they were before. And we come from an infrastructure company, as I said, electricity grids, gas grids, data grids, water grids. And if we can focus on this question and answering these questions and getting all the auxiliary services around that in an ecosystem, which is not only service providing, but as we see here now, also in other aspects helpful and fun to work with, then it's a great combination for us.
Yeah, fun to work with. I think that's a very, very important topic. I was a bit hesitant to mention it in the beginning, because I want to be like very serious here. And, but I mean, that's really also one of the benefits. And we discussed this yesterday evening over dinner, that one of the key qualifying issues for a potential partner is that you find people that you really like to work with and that you enjoy hanging out with, because otherwise it doesn't work. It's, I mean, and I have some examples. I mean, it was like more like digital interaction with companies where there's a perfect fit for a partnership, but we didn't get along with the people for I don't know what reason, but like no empathy or just like, and then it's not worth the effort.
And it's like the good old saying that business to business or even enterprise between enterprises is always actually human to human, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. So fun ticked. Henri, your solution, your AI machine is a pretty standalone thing, I think. So what categories of partnering are relevant for you? What's less relevant? What do you want to really keep completely under your control in-house? And where are you a bit more relaxed? And also maybe you mentioned you're like a serial entrepreneur, so for Hepta, but also in general, for other companies. What do you think?
In general, I think, of course, the entire purpose of that is again, to provide whatever needs to be provided, the end-to-end, the complete value proposition or solution. And yes, as said before, you're probably missing some of the pieces. And in general, you can select whether it's in-house, you're doing it in-house, you're purchasing this from the supplier, the missing pieces, or you establish a strategical alliance with someone else, some strategic partnership. And the usual trends, at least to me, what I've noticed, have always been somewhat like inclining towards the first two options, which is we do it in-house, we do everything, and so not for our case, but what we've seen, and we purchase from a supplier. But at least for the past few years, I also see that the trend or the mindset, the drift is or some change in the mindset is happening or takes place. And more businesses are starting to, especially in the enterprise segment, are starting to focus on establishing relationships with like star alliances with strategic partners. And that's of course also what we are doing with our companies as well. That's where we see a lot of value. One thing, I mean, just information and collaboration wise, I think you can distinguish like there's a, let's say, solution-oriented relationship, which is our communication, and that's more like the tech side. The technology is always, communicating. This is the API, the integrations, different platforms, different layers, and then there's the good old like the sales, go-to-market, building relationships, and so forth. And I'd say it's nothing different for us as well, as we are performing for large enterprises, and definitely we're still small companies. Both of the companies are small. I mean, Hepta Airborne, we have around like 35 people, and we don't have all the tools, and we don't necessarily see a need to also deliver the entire value chain in-house, as an example. It's inefficient. You will not win because the market moves faster. So you need to understand what is the core value proposition, what's the best knowledge and IP you can keep in-house. In our case, that's the data science, and that's knowing everything about the power lines, the infrastructure, and automating that process, and using also artificial intelligence to detect failures and defects of the data that we're acquiring about the grid. So that's something that we're keeping in-house. That's where we're not experimenting with external partners, but everything else. I mean, the value proposition to the utility, which is our customer, is somewhat holistic, I'd say. We're as we said, we're deploying like huge drone programs or using satellites. Then it's just also how to go in front of the customer. There's the sales-oriented partnerships with different companies, and so I'd say there's actually a lot of missing pieces in our value proposition, and we're communicating and having those star alliances with both technology-wise, platforms, integrations, but also in strategic partnerships to just get out there, be visible, be credible in front of the end customer.
Interesting. I mean, I have two aspects I would like to mention. So for those of you that are not super familiar with this topic, what I recommend is to look at the partner websites of later stage companies, Silicon Valley or Europe, doesn't really matter. So they all have like these partner programs, and it's interesting to look at it because you see obvious stuff. Yeah. So the technology companies that require system integration efforts, they partner with system integrators. So what you find there is like always Accenture, Capgemini, whatever, because this is just a source of work for these companies. Yeah, because you need like a bus of guys and girls that screw in the technology, and that's something that you do with the obvious people, and you offer customers choices. Then you also see like complementary technologies that are being promoted on this partner website, stuff that just fits together nicely, and so on and so forth. So that's quite a good and interesting thing. The other aspect that's maybe a visibility thing, or also something that is good for storytelling. When you have some of these partnerships, I think it's very good for storytelling purposes because it enriches the own story that you can tell and you can expand, which customers typically like. Also, investors are I think interested to understand what you're doing and what's the bigger picture, and that can also help in that regard. Last 5 minutes. Let's get a bit operational. So this is actually some ideas how to go about this. So I think what's something we've done quite a bit is just like PR. So you issue like press releases or blog posts where you announce that you're kind of talking to each other, working together is super easy. No investment, no big loss of focus, easily done. And as I said in the beginning, it's quite remarkable how much response and feedback you get from this stuff. I made the experience, especially with European-based startups, that they want to have like 5 calls on technical integration. In Silicon Valley, not one call. People say, look, when we have a customer that is paying, we can talk about the integration. And it's like technology-wise, it takes like 3 minutes to understand what's possible and not for savvy technical people. So they don't even need to talk about it. And also, you don't need to formalize this. We have lately we received like a 13-letter agreement, a 13 pages agreement of a European Berlin-based startup, and said, why do we need this paperwork? Yeah? And we go for it because we don't want to be complicated. I can tell you, in the Valley, nobody would do this. This is just, people, and you say, hey, let's do something together, and then you do it, and then you see what happens. And if something happens, okay, fine. If nothing happens, then okay, it's also fine, and we gave it a try. When, for example, you establish reseller relationships or with system integrators, that's a bit of a different piece. You need to agree on revenue share mechanisms and things like that, yeah. But I would advocate for, being just fast, being pragmatic, just, test things, and if it works, fine. If it doesn't work, forget about it. Yeah. The same is like with marketing stuff. So we've done a bunch of joint webinars, especially in the COVID time. That was like useful because it's very difficult, or it was very difficult to reach your target audience. Yeah. So you do something together. What's useful is you can then use that as a reference point in conversations with customers, or this stuff is recorded, then people can watch something if they like. So this is easily done. To be honest, I don't think everybody is doing that. So a lot of people just don't think this is relevant, and I don't understand, because people post everything on Instagram, but in their business they don't use these channels. Yeah. And I'm not really like a digital native. Yeah. No, 0 posts on Instagram. Yeah. We discovered that. We will change that. So there's so much you can do, and in B2C it's clear everybody does it, but I think it's in B2B it's the same. Yeah. So people use just digital all around, and so you have to be in the people's face, yeah, with videos and with collateral and with stuff, yeah. And when you do something together, it becomes even more interesting, yeah. I think also aligning business development efforts is something that you can easily do. I mean, you have target account lists, you can share them, and you see who has connections where, yeah. I mean, we've done this. Sometimes we are a little bit sloppy, but there's no investment needed. You can only win something. You can't lose anything. It's a no-regret move. And I already mentioned mapping existing networks and things like that. So a lot of stuff that can be done, easily done. Our conclusion is go for it, do it, the ones that are interested. And I think we are running out of time. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. The audience for hanging in there, respect, and I wish you a pleasant evening. Don't drink too much, stay safe, and
communicate and collaborate, yeah?
And communicate and collaborate, yes.
Not just through APIs.
Not through APIs, exactly. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.